Kevin, can you hear us now? I've done one online.
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, great, thank you.
Could you pull that line down a little more and get far ahead? Keep going. Great, thank you.
Do you want to wait for anyone else?
I know Bob is not coming. He has an emergency he's dealing with. So I am filling in for Hood River.
All right.
You heard?
Chris, I think that's. We don't get to- Christie's iPad, is that Commissioner, that's Christy Chapman? Is that-
I'm gonna leave. I have to leave after an
Okay.
hour. We have an incredibly long meeting tonight. We had a 1,200-page packet this meeting.
Did you read it all?
I have worked my way through it. Let me put it that way.
This is the county?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have fun with Mike on that one. 1,200.
1,200 pages, yeah, 1,272 pages, I think. Just that there's a land use
We do
thing
not
that
have
has
1,200
about
pages.
25 years of history associated with it. I'm not gonna talk about it till after.
Someday have a
We'll see if we dispatch it today or not.
Absolutely not. We will never make it our goal to have more than 1,200 pages, unless it's a plan set.
I mean, just 5 minutes ago, we got a 40-page addendum to the packet. So. Which by itself, so man, you want me to read 40 pages in the next hour and a half?
Yeah.
While you're at another commission meeting.
Right.
All right. You ready to?
Let's give it a couple more minutes to see if Catherine was on her way in.
I don't think Mayor Keywood is going to attend.
Oh, okay.
I didn't hear from her.
Okay, then let's go ahead.
All right. All right, so we'll get started. We do have a lot to get through, so we will try to be as efficient as possible. So if we go too fast or if you need questions on a certain topic, just tell us to slow down and we'll go back and do that. But otherwise, we can try to move fairly quickly. The October 14th meeting, I thought was tremendously successful. We had over 30 legislative reps here from Washington and Oregon. I think there was only one or two of those that were actually staff. The rest were actually the either senators or the reps. So very, very successful event. And from what I've heard, everybody has gotten very positive feedback. So
I'll just give you my perspective. I thought, Mike, your opening remarks were just spot on. I mean, he's got a slide deck now that we ought to get. And when we're talking to our legislators, there's some really good pictures that you can just pull up and use. Just excellent. I thought, Terry, you did a great job, impressing everybody with, yeah, we can get the money. I don't know. Yeah, we can get the money. You brought a lot of credibility based on your expertise. I think Christy did an outstanding job getting this thing organized. Catherine and others. I just look at the logistics of it and how it actually came together. 3 days before, there was a few people that were kind of going, I hope this works. But it did, and you guys did a magnificent job. Then we get down to the panel discussion. And Marla, I thought you handled that magically. I don't know how you did it, but it came off that it was extremely supportive of the bridge from a whole bunch of different perspectives, and the legislators that I talked to really saw it. I mean, it was obvious. So great job there. And I just kind of come back and reflect on the team in general. You know, there is absolutely no excuse for us failing this operation. There isn't going to be the term fail. This project's going to be a rip-roaring success, and when it could be used as a showcase if you want to get something done. Using people on both sides of counties or rivers or states, this is the way to do it. And it's just fun to do. So,
Yeah, no,
Could I make a quick comment too?
yes, sir.
What I saw, people commented to me on our sincerity, especially what they saw in the panel discussion. Our degree of preparation was well beyond, they thought they were coming to some little hip corner of the country where no one knew what they were doing and they would have to explain to us how the world worked. And what people saw was a group that had absolutely everything figured out. And the commentary I got was, could you come and help us do this in our district? So I think that came across, absolutely clearly. I wanted to comment on one thing that for some reason with the folks at the table I was at really resonated, and I was surprised, but it's just incredibly powerful to them. Somehow the fact that the ladder truck for the fire department cannot get across
A lot
the
of people
bridge.
picked up on that.
People were talking about
Yeah.
that and they just kept on bringing it up again and again. I'm not even sure I can say what that represented to them, but that really drove it home. And some, every time there's a debate, some magical moment comes out and resonates. And for some reason, that was what resonated. So if you guys can figure out why it resonated, do more of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and what it was for those who weren't there was the ladder truck that's in Hood River cannot cross the bridge, even at the previous weight loads, it cannot. So if there's an issue on the White Salmon side that needs a ladder truck, you're an hour away.
Right.
That just really seems to stick with everybody, so.
And it's really interesting is, I signed the check to purchase that ladder truck, 10 years ago. It was like $800,000. And I didn't know that. And Mayor McBride told me that she wasn't aware of that
Yeah.
until now. And I think you mentioned you didn't know that either, right?
Yeah, no, it was news to me when I talked to
Right.
Chief Pointer earlier in the week.
Right. And in fact, the chief told me that the Hood River Fire Chief said that he didn't know about it until relatively recently. So it's
Very
interesting.
All right, anything else? Oh,
I would just say also thanks to the JLA team. They really scrambled to put all those boards together and that's always a lift. So really appreciated having, I think that kind of to Arthur's point helped us look very professional when people walked in and organized. So thank you.
Mayor McBride, did you have a couple of comments on the event? on
We're just
Friday?
doing the debrief.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I had is that, and you, Arthur and I talked about this a little bit. And you may have already mentioned it, Arthur.
I'm not sure where you're going. So I can't-
Okay, all right. And it just, when we were talking about the tolling, the current tolling and where that money's going and where the tolling price might change within the next few years before the bridge is built and where that money's going. It felt confusing. I at least the people that were at my table and people were kind of going, what? I kind of like, it wasn't really clear. And I think that they were like, well, is it just going to the port? Is it not going to the new bridge? I mean, they weren't sure what was happening with the money now and in the next few years. They understood when the bridge is built, it's all going to go to the bridge. But that interim period, I think they felt confused.
The question that was
and
asked.
probably rightly so, if we don't have an agreement on the port, within the port of how we're gonna deal with that.
Yeah, and
We've got a couple of visions.
Yeah, but the question was asked was, are you open to the concept of increasing the tolling to pay for preparing for this new bridge? And
That I
that's
tried to
the answer
say
was yes.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
think you said yes, but then you kind of added.
You-
And
you got
then
too
they got
specific.
like, what does that really mean? I think they were kind of like, well, what does that really mean?
Hmm.
It got kind of fuzzy after that point.
Okay,
So I just, that was the only point that I kind of was seeing people go, oh, what? Felt like we did repeat a lot of things, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I mean, for me, I'm like, oh, I've heard it 100 million times already. But they've only heard it 3 times. And so I think that was fine to have repeat some stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll chime in real quick. I would say that my biggest takeaways is everyone did a great job, and yes, we looked very professional and spot on. Those storyboards, I think we can use those in the future, and I think we just need to keep driving these points home to the people. And the biggest takeaway that I got was the realization of how dependent our communities, all of our communities in the gorge, are on this structure. That if the structure were to go away, vital services would not be very convenient for people, and businesses would have to rethink their business models and probably close. So I think that when people think of bridges and they just think of big cities, and if a bridge went down, then you just reroute the people and they can go somewhere else. But here it's very, very different. And I think that was the biggest thing I noticed people talking about.
And thank you to Commissioner Souter for attending. He was one of the charter members, advice working group, so it's good to see him in attendance for maybe one last time.
represented well.
You did.
Okay,
All right, the DC trip, there's not a whole lot that's progressed with that. We're going the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So as the agenda and things get put together, we'll communicate those out. But for now, it's just on here as a reminder that that's coming up.
just a snippet on that. Does it make sense? We may want to take at least a couple of those storyboards with us. I think it kind of depends on who Hal has this.
Yeah, I think let's talk through that with Hal and see what his thoughts are, and if we have the opportunity to say anything or show him anything, it
If
would be
we're
good.
going to new people that we haven't been to before.
Yep.
If it's the same people, then probably not.
It'd be kind of cumbersome carrying those boards around.
I would, if you want the boards, I would recommend maybe just printing them there. And I can just send y'all with a flash drive with the files to have printed. So you don't have to travel with them.
I would let Hal tell you how people react if you show up in their office with an easel.
Yeah.
I know how I would react.
Here's a brand new card just for you.
Okay. All right.
The other thing for the DC trip, and Carrie, maybe this is something, that if we end up talking to Department of Transportation again, and specifically after TIFIA, maybe there's some package we could put together that serves some really good speaker notes of how we're trying to tackle that. And I think the same thing holds true for the tribal MOAs. If we had some kind of a storyline there that says, here's what we're trying and pushing forward with.
Okay. All right, we continue to meet with Oregon legislatures. We had 3 last week. We've got 3 more this week. There was one just prior to the meeting today. So we'll continue to do those. I think that's been well done, and it's going well. I think all of them have been positive. Seems like everybody's been pretty supportive of the bridge, so I think those have gone well. Grant status, no real changes here. We did get one notice back that we will have to resubmit on the SS4A grant, so we will do that when it comes back up for the next round. The other 3, we did send the emails in for with the additional bridge information to the infra, well, not infra, to the MPDG rural and mega grants and also the BIP grant. So they got our updated bridge information with the
What were-
ratings.
Again, what were they asking for? What type of question did they ask?
Well, this wasn't questions. This was just us providing them the additional bridge information from the
Okay.
draft bridge report. So
Okay.
we just gave them that. The last questions that we had were just on how we were going to do long-term maintenance. So it was a similar response that we had before, that the tolling would pay for the long-term maintenance.
I
of the
think there's a
bridge.
question about the certainty on state.
Yeah.
Mega and Bill, or Mega and
Rural.
rural did ask an additional
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
So, and we haven't heard anything since that response. So,
You know, during these little briefings that we've had with state folks, we've been trying to insert an idea that, hey, if you can't commit funds to us now, Oregon, can you at least give us a letter that says they support the bridge? We're supported, or we're committed to do our share. We don't know what that is. We don't know when it's gonna be, but we intend to be there. Would that help us with the federal grants? And if that is yes, then we need to take an action to draft up such a document and get it to the right people and Oregon and get it behind us.
It sounds like a blank check. No one's gonna sign a blank check.
No, but it's the intent. It's a letter of commitment that has no real
commitment.
commitment.
Letters. of-
I think we need to have a discussion about the politics of this whole thing, but it's probably not it's a subcommittee, not a public meeting.
Okay. Treaty MOA with the tribes, we did get a review from legal counsel. Schwabe actually has a lady that went to school, and Commissioner Foxton and I we were at a Pacific Northwest Waterways Association. Did I get that right? PNWA meeting, and she actually did a presentation. Her background is actually tribal agreements. So she was phenomenal. I mean, she really knew the tribal aspects. So she will be, I think, very helpful as just an outside reviewer and commenter to provide us maybe some guidance and some key points when we go through these. She's working on some red line edits of the Yakima agreement to take into account the approach where we do I'll call it an exclusion area, where they are, we pay them to not fish within a certain area around the bridge for some period of time during construction. So she thought that was a good idea. She thought that was a good approach to that. So she's working on developing some of that language for us, and hopefully we'll
And
get
she
that back
was
very
quick
soon. So,
To make your point that the lease is with a family for a
Yeah.
particular geographical area. So this exclusion zone really has to come back to how many families are in that exclusion zone. And how big is that family's lease property, if you will, to come up with numbers for that.
and that'll be part of the negotiation process. We'll be working that out, and just for scale, and this may have absolutely nothing to do with anything that gets worked out, but just for scale, the 19 million that was paid on the 520 project, which was roughly 4 billion, right? In that neighborhood. If you scale that down to our $500 million bridge and just said, we were going to be in that ballpark, that's a few $1 million that we might be looking at. So just may have nothing to do with it, but if that's the only reference we have, that's just a quick reference that we calculated and do
Now,
have.
Kevin, am I wrong? Didn't we have a discussion 6 months ago or so? Does the feds pay that agreement?
They do, the way it will likely manifest itself is that, for example, we received a $5 million build grant.
Yeah.
The expectation is that part of that bill or the BIP or the whatever federal grant, those expenses would come out of that. So it's not like they're gonna come out and
Some
fund it
new
from
funding.
some separate
But it's
source.
part of our 500 million.
Correct.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
So we're working through those. The section 106 is in legal review. It's progressing. Though that both of those MOAs need to kind of progress together for at least a little while longer in order to get sign off on the 106. So we're still looking at the end of the year on the 106 to be ready for signature. The same thing with the biological opinions. So next week we will check in with ODOT and see where they are with the biological opinion.
I thought they were supposed to have the draft done by the 17th.
They didn't give us a date. They said middle of October to the end of October. So we are gonna check this week or next week and see how they're going. With the final at the end of the year. So
The interesting one, once we get through ODOT and it goes to NOAA. We had a guy at the Pacific Northwest Waterway Association.
Yeah.
He wasn't the top dog, but
pretty
2 or
close.
3 layers down, but pretty towards the top. His first comment out of his mouth was, I apologize, we're understaffed. We can't meet your requirements. And he just kind of blasted that out to the entire community. With no specifics, which one am I not supporting? And one of the guys, partway through the discussion, he was talking about they're expanding into wind and solar offshore. And one of the guys at the meeting jumps up and said, well, why are you doing that when you can't even do what you've got on your plate now? Why are you accepting more? And then he was kind of backpedaling that, no, we're really not going into that. We're just kind of supporting whatever that meant. So we're gonna have to, I think we're gonna have to make a phone call to help spur that final review. Will it do any good? I don't know, but at least lets them know that we know. But it sounds like there's a lot of people on that list.
I would agree. Any other questions on the FEIS, Rod?
Are you gonna go back and talk about CFA?
Oh, sorry, I totally jumped right over top of the CFA. So commission formation agreement, the second draft is in review. There was a piece to the packet that had the review of the place of business. That gave you some thoughts on that. One edit to that is we got some clarification from the Washington side. There is not the limit that we thought on the TIFIA. They do have a process to go to a longer time period. They just have never done that. So that piece is really a wash between Oregon and Washington. So the question I would guess with that on the business location is, with that information, what other questions does the Bi-State Working Group have or would like information that they would like to have in order to make a decision on the preferred place of business? And one piece to that is that just because you pick Oregon or Washington as the preferred place of business does not mean that's where you have to put the office that would actually house the people that were doing the work. So you could pick Oregon and then put the location of the office in Washington. But wherever you as part of the agreement, designate as your preferred place of, it's not preferred, it's the wrong word, primary place of business will be the official primary place of business and the laws of the state that you will have to follow. I have an opinion if you want it, but I don't know.
Your opinion for just a minute.
Yep.
Don't say anything.
Yep.
Do you guys have an opinion? Have you gone through the
I
document?
have, yeah.
And so I would like to hear what you guys think.
Without stating my opinion, what I'll say is, I think it's more of a policy question than it is a financial question. The financial, the table sort of lays out some financial situations, but I am more swayed to consider the politics, the policy of the politics of the policy than I am the specifics of the finance.
And I
when
didn't,
you
I didn't
reviewed
see it that way, Arthur. I thought there were some financial.
Oh, no, they clearly are.
Yeah, not maybe.
No, I'm willing
huge.
to overlook them is what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm
you're
willing to get beyond that, and I think that I'm more interested in us deciding on a policy basis what we want to do as opposed to using the finances to make that decision for us. That's all.
Yeah,
Based on the-
I feel
on the
I feel the opposite.
Okay,
Yeah, based on the finances, did you formulate an opinion, not on the political side, but on pure finances? What would you see? as
pure
more effective?
finances, you go with Oregon.
Okay, and then politically or the other piece, how would you?
I think there's a strong message to going with Washington because of the history of the port, and I would like to, in view of the public, I would like to put that in our past. But I would go with either one.
May I make a comment on that? Because I thought about it from both sides, and I would say that 5-6 years ago, I would absolutely agree with you that, you know, there's been bad blood between the two states. And so as an olive branch, having it then be the headquarters made a lot of sense. I would say that this working group, the relationship that has been, I think the relationship has been corrected. I think that there's so much transparency. And the one thing that I would strongly consider, and I don't care either way, is that the port office has tolling software. And I know that, you know, it may or may not be the tolling software that is used for the new bridge. The port's invested a lot of money in that software to create it. And it seems like maybe the bi-state group might consider contracting with the port to continue that piece or that model. And also the port has a maintenance crew that is very familiar with working on bridges and all of that. And so the bi-state group may consider contracting, I don't know, with the port to continue that piece of the puzzle. And the port offices have to be moved and probably rebuilt somewhere else. And so it seems like a likely kind of I wouldn't call it a marriage, but a partnership. And if we're moving forward and saying, okay, we have to move the port offices, we're going to have to rebuild something. Let's envision this to be this larger facility, or maybe a slightly larger facility that could house and operate both of these pieces together, right at the base of the bridge. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Christie. Mayor McBride, what do you think?
Purely on financial, I think it should be in Oregon. And you know, that I'm making my decision on the money. Just because you think that 20 cents more for everybody going across the bridge, or 25 cents more, if we can have an Oregon entity to make it less money to cross the bridge, I just think everybody wins in the community. Yes, I understand the politics and I understand the previous thing, but I am trying to look forward. This is going to be a great thing for both sides of the river, and to try and make it less expensive for the community. That's the decision I'd make.
What was the 20 cents that you're referring to?
In this.
Oh,
study?
there were some different numbers that were in the,
That's
you know,
summary.
there were 20 cents for this, it might be more for this, but it just financially, there was a savings to have it in Oregon. So that's purely my only reason.
Marlo, your thoughts?
I definitely, I think, align with Arthur's sentiment of, I think there's some optics and perception that shouldn't drive the ultimate decision, but I think at this stage, like, I am taking into consideration. And I think one question I would have is this really going to ultimately be a decision that we're making in this formation document of where this is
Yes.
seated?
Yes.
So then I guess where I would lean towards, because ultimately we have to make the best decision for the future. But I think we need to learn some lessons of why there's bad blood in the community on decisions in the past. And I think it would benefit us to maybe think about having, and maybe this is already in JLA's mind, but as we work towards this relaunch of this project into the community, I think this would be a great opportunity to have some outreach, maybe a meeting or two, where we throw out the considerations of both and get some input so that we hear, because I think from that, it would inform me if it was some strong sentiment, like I suspect you're gonna get in the community level, and then weighing what we might get at our state levels. I would feel better making an informed decision after some of those steps are taken, because I think it shows us trying to be true to what's in the best interests of the communities.
And one, just want to make sure I said this the right way. Just because the primary place of business is in one state or the other does not mean that the actual location of all or part of the facilities has to be in that same location. So you could have primary place of business in Oregon, get the financial benefits, but actually locate the headquarters in Washington. You could then put the operations side on the Oregon side. So there's not anything that says all of it has to be in one place. So
But the
there's-
formation has to land in one
the
state.
formation has to say the primary place of business has to be in one state or the other, and that just sets the legal rules by which it will operate under.
And that'll set some of the those requirements
Yeah.
that then,
But the physical location could be,
Yeah.
and then the people that work there would be in Washington and, operate and run out of, Washington, if you want to go that route. There are options. I just don't want anybody to think just because you pick Oregon as the primary place of business because it's the best financial place, that then all the physical buildings and operations have to be in Oregon. They do not have to be. There's flexibility there. So.
I think just trying to explain that to the public is,
Gonna be
it's
confusing.
gonna be
It
confusing.
is, yes.
yeah, well, I mean, this is
Wait,
where we have
especially-
JLA to like
Yeah.
pick up some of that, because like, this isn't what we would
Yeah.
take to them.
Yeah.
I think we would figure out like the 5 key things that separate that decision of like benefit to Washington-based, benefit to Oregon. But I do think some of the optics of like making the decision without that step. And then potentially if that decision is Oregon and there's scenarios of interlocals or agreements of the port, that is gonna feel to a lot of Washington residents like, but nothing's changing.
Yeah, here we
This
go.
is another port deal and Washington's getting screwed. Even if that is not ultimately what's happening, because that bridge is gonna bring value, but I just think we have a chance to be out in front of that being the eventual sentiment, even if there's a decision that's made ultimately for Oregon. And so yeah, I think I want to stay firm and weighing both, but I think we would benefit by taking time to add in some of these steps to just get some input. And if no one shows up and no one gives feedback, that's
They're
not
not-
bad.
yeah,
Yeah,
then they're
maybe
like,
that
"Oh, whatever."
affirms, like, we need to, people are just tired of this whole thing and we need to make the
Just get
best
it done, you
decision,
guys.
but yeah.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
I see the optics. I think in the end, we're gonna have to spend a lot of time getting beyond those optics. Like Christie was saying, if we're gonna have to have a port office, a new port office, and we're gonna have to have an office for the new Bi-State Bridge Authority, I see no reason that we can't share one conference room like we do now. I just look at, I'm just trying to look at the financial picture on this. I did, the easiest thing I could say to anyone from Washington, is, hey, do you go shop in Oregon? Yeah. Why do you go shop in Oregon? So I don't have to pay sales tax. So do you want us to have this thing in Oregon or Washington? Do you want to pay sales tax every time you drive across the bridge?
I know, but see, then I see from a Washington perspective, so much of that sentiment is about tolling being directed and all the investments on the Oregon side, which again, you could argue the whole, like that takeaway on Friday, we're all interconnected. You would see some of the businesses in Washington if the waterfront here potentially hadn't built up. But I think that some of those, an investment like the bridge or some of the tax implications, if it were rooted in a Washington community, is a good show or argument potentially to counter, well, here are some direct investments coming back into these communities on the Washington side from a pretty significant infrastructure project in this region.
But the other thing I think, if we do this, and I think we should, we've got to keep educating people that under the new legislation, any tolls coming off that bridge stay with the bridge. It doesn't go anyplace else. And we got to keep getting that message out there with some credibility that, oh, yeah, this is a new date, regardless of where it ends up to be. You know, I really like the idea of doing a couple of outreaches to give the public a chance to vent out a little bit and then bring their recommendation forth. If it was just purely financial, which I tend to lean more towards, it would be Oregon. But I certainly understand the political side of it that, you know, Washington has felt like they've got the raw end of the deal for many, many years. So if that's what really comes across, I'm very flexible.
And just to be clear, it's not a perception problem.
No, it's real.
It's fact.
Yeah. Now, where the perception is the understanding that the port did exactly what they were chartered to go do. And that was to take tolls off the bridge and go develop local properties with the idea of
Local being defined in the port district, which is Hood County.
yeah,
Alaska,
and to
Cascade
create
Locks, and
long-term
Meadows.
jobs.
Right.
Okay, now,
In the port district,
yes,
which
so
is.
they
you should
did what
understand
they
why
were
people feel that.
chartered to do.
Yeah.
And I think
Question
it's
that.
all of our fault that we let them go as long as they did without saying, wait a minute, let's change that. We didn't do that. So,
The other thing,
Wait, but,
the other thing, if, you know, and again, this is maybe a little in the weeds, but in the future, once this bi-state authority is propped up, I mean, I guess one of the things we have to think about is like, are they going to have staff and have an, you know, and like, how big is this bi-state authority going to become? Or is it going to be one of those things where there's going to be this legislative body that does control the tolls and it does control the direction and whatnot, and they subcontract the maintenance and the tolling and the software and everything out to other agencies or companies? And so how big of a staff are we really thinking about? Because in my opinion, it seems like once this is set up and once it's rolling, it seems like it would be financially better for them to contract the maintenance out and contract other things out and just have like a monthly board meeting for themselves. But I could be reading wrong on this.
well, there's other things for the new board to consider once the bridge is built as well, and that could be give the thing up to WashDOT or DOT, let them take it over. It's a new bridge. Maintenance on a new bridge should be relatively small for a number of years. And it's a concrete bridge or structure type bridge where maintenance should be a lot different than what we're spending on the current bridge. And yeah, I agree with you, Christie, that some of the work on the bridge our guys can do. But this is going to be a totally different bridge. A lot of the work on our bridge has to be subbed out anyway. And then tolling is a whole different animal. I think there's technology out there that we need to consider to really lower the overall operating cost. I'm personally not ready to say, let's use any particular software. We need to keep a really open mind. What's the best for the project for the long term? So I'm kind of hearing that. Do we want to have a couple of outreach sessions in the next, it's got to be relatively short.
Yeah, because what's our timeline of
So I mean, ideally,
on our,
the set timeline currently, when this can be changed, was to have the CFAs done in January and then have it fully functioning by July. There's some room in there, definitely for us to slide some things around. So if we want to do a couple outreaches, I would say try to do those, you know, in the next few weeks, and then another one sometime in between Thanksgiving and Christmas so that we can get a good response, but try to do them this year and then come back maybe if we could get them done, maybe in the December meeting, or come back in January and try to make the decision early next year. And then we probably could stay still on track with the July full, but I think there is time for us to do a couple outreach meetings.
So the issues that we're gonna bump into, and frankly, I think it's more important to get it right than to get it on schedule, is that the original plan was the two counties were going to bring forward the new body in January, and they would be watching us for roughly 6 months. And then July 1st, they take over, we go away.
And they might mean
We,
Might-
the same group of
might be
people
us.
sitting here, but yeah.
We don't know that.
Our
Yeah, we
alter
don't know that.
egos.
We don't know that. Yeah.
So I personally think it's more important that we don't step on our toes here and start out with the community on the wrong foot with this new entity. So if it means that the July 1st, there's no magic date of July 1st, if it's August 1st or September 1st, who cares? As long as we get it right.
And is it my understanding, this outreach would only really needs to take place in Washington? I don't think that we need to have, or do you think that we need to have outreaches in Oregon as well? Seems to me like we only need to do Washington.
Yeah,
I think it's balanced to do
I'm-
both. I mean,
I was gonna say, I would at least do one in Oregon, and if nobody shows up and there's no comments, then maybe you don't do a second one, but I would at least do one.
we could
Yeah, I
go-
think it's valuable to get input from Oregonians for sure.
Say that
Just so-
again, Catherine.
I just think it would be helpful to make sure that we are just balancing the input by getting input from both sides of the river.
Yeah, what I feel like
Are we creating a problem for ourselves that we don't really want to create?
say more.
If I went and asked anybody in Oregon and said, do you care where the entity is located? We could have a tolling, or, a toll booth anywhere. If there's a toll booth, but where the office is located, that can still be anywhere, but where the legal place of business is. Now, if I ask anybody out there, do you really care what the legal place of business is? If it costs you 20 cents more, every single person in Oregon says, I hate paying the toll as it is. I don't want to pay 20 cents more. Do what's smart. If I ask just about anybody who usually is whining about the bridge toll on the other side, and they say, for the sake of saying that it's in Washington, is that worth 20 cents to you? I don't know anybody who's gonna be like, yep, I want to pay 20 cents more every time I talk.
I mean, I don't know what the number is, but there were some numbers in there and it was definitely more money on Washington of some sort. I mean, I just don't think people are gonna, if that's the bottom line, if they cross the bridge all the time, it's the money. So that's the deal.
What was it? Jerry?
But
It's more than
Yes.
20. but-
Well, no, I actually don't think it's 20 cents. I mean, I think that the discussion about the extra money was really on the financing side. But
well, look, before the new bridge is even here, or this formation is launching on their set date, we know there are conversations we have to get into the weeds on and go into the community to explain toll increases before the new bridge even exists, while we continue to try to get funding from these other places. So I think the lift of a couple nights engaging with the people who are electing us to be their voice and make these decisions, and you're right, ultimately it's ours. We don't want to do all of this by massive committee, but I think 2 nights investment at minimum, one in Oregon, one in Washington. We get this information dialed into an easy to understand way of potential implication on tolling, maybe benefits while it's under construction, or what does it mean? What's the benefit to me if it's in Washington? What's the benefit if it's in Oregon? Spell it out, sit with whomever shows up, appreciate that they're getting engaged. And then we take that feedback, we feel more confident having a little input, and we're still making a decision somewhat in the same time frame. And I just think it builds up where we've just been for years at a deficit of some improved trust and relationship into the community that we're trying to represent their interests and being engaged back to them and transparent. And I don't know that it's too much, I don't think it's too much of a burden and a delay or like diminishing our role to make the eventual decision. I just think it's trying to practice what we said we do.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
So do I.
Yep.
Let's do it. Okay,
All right,
so we've got consensus. Let's go do it. So how do we do it? Mr. Project Manager?
I think
we will set that up. We will-
Yeah,
I'll work with JLA. We'll get one on each side set up and we'll keep everybody informed as far as dates.
you'll
and
figure out what
times and
questions to
what
ask
to
about the
ask and-
structure.
yep,
We don't have to get into the
yeah,
weeds on
we'll
that.
work all of that out.
Yeah,
outside.
we don't need to micromanage it. We can
Yep.
do it. We'll be there.
But just speaking to what Marla just stated, should this be one piece of that conversation over a broader topic while there? Because usually what people want to do is they want to show up and they just want to be heard. And they're gonna want to talk about a lot of different things. Probably about what you were already mentioning, about that perception, about where that money's went.
Right.
And maybe Mike needs to do some education for the people about, yeah, this is a conscious decision decades ago. That was made, that was fulfilled.
Basically saying, yeah, you're right.
But it'll be a good opportunity to do that. So that's good.
And we could do that. We can talk about what the full agenda will be, whether we, you don't want to get it too broad, but same thing, you don't want to just come in and have a singular and tell them, well, we're not talking to you about anything else either. I think it would be a good opportunity to hear them and,
It'll
we
even be
we
an
can work on that, what that is.
be an opportunity that, when the cables have to be replaced, because they have to be replaced soon. And then, people say there will be continued maintenance on the current bridge because you have to put those new cables in their frame. And you don't want that piece falling off of there while you're going across there between now and when the new bridge gets built. We're sorry, we wish we didn't have to spend that money, but we do in order to have it safe for you to go across it for the next
What
years.
What I'm hearing from you and from Jake also is that this may be an opportunity to, this is signaling a more transparent, more open process moving forward. So one of the things which is going to be highlighted in this discussion is the discussion of the next decision coming down the road is where the entity is formed. There's a bunch of other stuff coming in. We're also giving you information on a bunch of other stuff, and I'm sure that JLA will.
And I think what we could lay out is
that's
they're gonna, you'll start seeing some stuff from them. We talked this morning about the communications plan and some of that. So we could also lay out, well, here's some other meetings we're gonna have, here's what's coming up. And on a regular basis, we're gonna be doing this over the next 6 to 9 months just to get started. But yeah, we could do that also and lay
Make
out.
it worth people's time
Yeah,
to come there. It's more than just one very short
Exactly, yeah.
discussion on that.
What I get asked out in the community is what's going on.
Right.
And maybe a briefing fairly short, but similar, maybe Mike, what you did, for the legislators on Friday. Or perhaps a shortened version of it, not so much talk. Think about pretty much what you said. Try and keep it,
Mhm.
15 minutes or something like that, but I think most people in the community would welcome. Yeah, I know you guys are doing something down there, but what are you doing?
Well, and it would be a good kickoff because they're going to start seeing a lot more from us. I mean, as JLA ramps up the websites and the outreach, it's really just something they were planning to do, which was the initial public kickoff that,
Yep.
and that's kind of what we could gear it around is just here's what's coming and things are going to start moving. They're going to start seeing people out here working and geotech doing borings and things happening. So, it would be good just to do a kickoff for the whole meeting, the whole
But also
program.
people need to understand, we still haven't figured out how we're paying for this.
Yep.
Right, and there's been the perception that's been created that everything's just moving forward and you just wait and we're gonna have a new bridge in a couple of years, and it's like, no, that's not what's happened. And that propaganda that's been spreading that's been actively spread for a couple of years now we need to adjust the tone and get back to an actual transparency and honesty, which I don't think has been characteristic of the last couple of years.
And that's part of what our amendment 2 is actually gonna, you're stealing all Carrie's thunder, just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
I'm sorry.
Steal away.
JLA thunder.
Steal away. Let's talk.
So one of
Less listening you'll have to do to me.
on the CFAs to the next point, if we're good there, we'll start that process. That was the local appointments. Marley, you had asked a question about whether the cities can do that. They can. We can make that however, do the appointments however you would like to do that. The one thing that we would recommend would be to not have a position by default end up being on the board. So because you're the mayor of White Salmon, you're automatically on the board. That
Yeah.
has a big
agree with
problem
that.
with the rating agencies. But the city making an appointment and saying, here's our recommendation or here's our appointment. As long as it's independent, and the point being that we want the board to have independence from the political from political elections. So if someone's on the board and they lose their political seat, they should not lose their seat on that board. Because that will bring credibility to the rating agencies if we have that. So, but if the recommend you had of like, you know, Benjamin White Salmon making one, Hood River City making one, and then the county's making the other two, or the port somehow, we can do any of those combinations. Probably the smaller, maybe the better perception wise, but
And I think what we had talked
We
about
have
was like,
options.
if we went that city route, and again, this was just like the feedback. One of our notes
Yeah.
from the city as we're collecting everyone's feedback, but just to make sure too, if that is getting considered. I think what we were also wanting to do was not add another step, like it
Right.
would still route. The Washington appointments would route through Clickitat County, the Oregon appointments route through Hood River County. It's just maybe one of those positions is coming from on Washington, the two cities.
Are you mentioning it as a nomination or as an appointment? In other words, would the?
Well, yeah, then is it like a
commission have
pass through or
discretion?
I'm not sure, I mean, maybe, well, in Washington, it would be easy since we have two cities, each city could make one and then the county can select it. It was more just a thinking of, you know, having some diverse other realms of diversity in the mindset that a city might bring forward of what they want thought about versus, you know, the county or, you know, just having kind of that involvement,
Yeah,
but.
I talked to Bob Benton, he's in his
Yes.
car, but I talked to him on his way out of town, and he said that they did discuss this in the meetings when he met with Steve, and you were in
Yep,
part of those
and-
meetings too, weren't you?
so the way it is set up now, and Steve, I think is on, can correct me if I say this wrong. Each one of them make a nomination now, each one of the six, and then the county has a process for making the actual appointments.
Right.
So they do make a nomination, and I guess that's the difference between a nomination and appointment. So if you want that person to be on the board, then it would be an appointment. If you just want to be able to nominate somebody, you have, the way it's written now, the ability to do that now. The county just has a defined process in making the appointments.
So
Um,
Bob's opinion and my opinion also is that it's gonna be hard to get people into these positions. This is, I mean, we have tons and tons of positions. We have 4 that we're appointing today. And we still have positions open. So it's hard to get people to volunteer for these things. If the cities are going to take on the job of beating the bushes to get some folks who are willing to do this, I am sure that both counties would be thrilled to have the cities take the role of helping us find people to fill those positions. So I don't think it's going to be something particularly controversial. The question was what the actual legislation says. I thought the legislation itself says that the committee is appointed by the
The
counties.
appointments are by, and Steve, again, correct me if I say this wrong, the appointments are by the counties, the nominations are by the 6 members.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to accept.
Let me correct that. This is Steve Siegel. The legislation says that the appointment and nomination process is whatever is agreed to in the commission formation agreement. You statutorily have complete flexibility.
So the way it's written right now, sorry, I said that wrong. So yeah, you have the flexibility to make the agreement however you want.
Good.
It's currently written that the counties make the appointments with nominations from the 6.
That's correct.
So I have a question. When you say the city is going to nominate, they can nominate just general citizen Sally Smith,
Or one of their own.
whoever
or
they,
one of their own, the mayor,
Yep.
one of the other council members,
yep, it's just not, we,
anyone.
we
It's not
would
tied to the
recommend it
position.
not be automatic. That if you get elected mayor, you automatically go on this board. If
Right,
you want to
okay. Mm-hmm.
just happen to nominate the mayor independently, then yes,
Okay.
that's.
Then you also said something about, for instance, let's just say this formed a year ago. And I was nominated. And there would be a period of time that this nomination would be for. Let's just say it was a 3-year term. Then I was nominated a year ago for 3 years. I'm not running now for the next, in January, I'm not running now. So would I continue on
Yep, that's
for
the,
those
Yeah.
2 years,
Yep.
even though I was not mayor, I would be,
yep, that's the
Okay,
independent,
that's
that's
how-
the
that's the intent.
independence that you want.
Okay, that's the
You
intent.
don't want
Yeah, I
it
just
to
wanted to
be,
clarify.
yeah, we don't
Okay.
want because you no longer choose to be mayor, that you now you're not on the board. You want the
Okay.
independence of the board operating independently of any
I'm not saying I
elections.
want to do it. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
clarify.
I
how it works.
was
Like,
already
we're gonna
gonna bring that to the meeting today for us to
Yeah,
ratify
nominate
your
me.
nomination.
But
So do we want to make a change to that approach that's currently in the draft CFA? We want to make it where the cities not only provide a candidate, it is the chosen one and the county stamps approval on it.
Well, the county has to because it's in the legislation.
no, it's not in the legislation.
not in the
We, the CFA has written that the county will do the appointments, so. I believe the modification would be is that each city would make a appointment and then the counties would make 2 appointments.
So there's a lot of statewide boards that the counties make appointments to. And they have different processes for each of them for, who advises on that and where nominations come from. But at the end of the day, it feels to me like we're doing one tonight for the Economical Alliance, Mountain Economic Alliance. And that benefits all residents of the county, but certainly very heavily residents of the city. I think it makes sense for these things to bubble up. And then be the actual appointment to be made by the counties. But I love the idea of having a formal nomination process and making clear that we're expecting, we're expecting the cities to come up with some names for us. And I think that's gonna work just fine.
I think it'll be fine too. What do you think, Jake? Are you good with that?
So what you're saying is, each city will nominate one person to the counties,
Mhm.
and then the counties will represent that.
Well, rubber stamp, I don't think the word rubber stamp is gonna be in there. It's the county's job to approve
Their nominations.
appointments.
Right, so we have to make the appointment like you're not admitting,
Right.
but the nomination is the nomination for appointment. It's not like when a county commissioner or anything else steps down and you put forward 2 names and then 3 county commissioners make a choice. That's what I'm trying to stay away from is potential politics of it.
Got it.
What I care about is when Tifia and these guys look at it and they're like,
Exactly.
we want politics out of this.
Right. I agree.
So if White Salmon provides you with a nominee,
A nominee,
do you have the ability to pick somebody else other than what White Salmon?
Yeah, I
You
think
would.
it's about figuring out, like, taking a little bit of both, like. Cause you're right, it's hard to get seats, people for all these, so if we're all like
Let's make it
committed,
harder,
so it doesn't fall just on the county to do that recruitment. But have some of that commitment is about believing that a city recommendation will get the nomination. Is it also though still giving the county the space that, to make the final decision of like, if there's 3 seats, Clickitat seats, 1 seat will be one of the city nominations, but Benjamin White Salmon could bring forward 2 or 3 in that lane, and the county's gonna pick one to sit as the city person. And then you have 2 others, or are you wanting just Benjamin sends 1 up, White Salmon sends 1 up, the county chooses one of those 2 to be the dedicated city appointment. If they liked both applicants or you didn't get enough, maybe that other city recommendation fills another seat, but what stays protected is one seat. The pipeline has to come through the cities. It's kind of. I don't know if I just got.
No, I understand exactly
Yeah.
what you said, and honestly, I mean, I don't, I really have a strong opinion, but what I would suggest as a way to sort of co-opt this is to say that the appointments are made by the counties, and that the counties establish a nominating process.
Yeah.
And that can be done separately from this, the nominating process. I would be strongly encouraging my board to have a nominating process where we ask the city who they want on it for one of the seats. And that we establish qualifications along with that nominating process, because I think there's more than just
Yeah.
just who came up with this person. I'd like to see if there's some actual qualifications, that they have some
Yeah.
understanding of finance, et cetera. So I would keep the nominating process separate from the CFA.
Yeah. I agree with that, because it gives
That
the
would be my intent.
board freedom in the future.
So from the Washington side, it would be the two cities providing candidate and to the county. On the Oregon side, it would be
Hood
Hood
River.
River and the port providing a recommendation. to the
What I'm saying is CFA would state that that the counties make the appointments, each making 3 appointments. Those appointments are from nominations, which come out of a nominating process, which is specified by the counties.
Steve,
Yes.
what does state law say about the nominating process, if anything?
No, I think what was just proposed is totally okay.
My personal opinion. Because politics is what it is. I would be happy where. I don't want to make the choices between 2 or 3 people between the 2 cities, but I would say city of Vision, you send me a name, citywide Hammond, you send me a name, and then this county, we have our own nominating process for all of our committees and we'll find it. And that's the way we do it, and that keeps, whether it's in the city's gonna pick somebody who's a resident in the city, whether it's on the city council or just a resident, it's still somebody who lives and goes through that regularly.
It doesn't have to be. Steve, you don't have to be a resident
You do
of
not.
any of these districts or cities, do you?
No, there's no, right now, there's no locational requirement.
I feel like it benefits us to make sure these people have.
This is why I want
a tie.
this is why I think that the nominating process is actually more complicated than we're making. There's more to consider for the nominations than we're discussing here. And that's why I don't want the CFA to have to specify all the details of the nomination, but specifically to realize pretty quickly, it's like, oh, we're not getting people who have no experience or people who have no knowledge in this area. We're going to learn over the first couple of cycles what it takes to make a good nomination, and I'd rather have some flexibility at the county level.
The county.
or two
So I
now.
guess maybe just in the CFA, right, to get back to like the 30,000 foot level. Pretty broad language. Is it of interest among the board? I'm guessing then for us. Do we want as these 6 entities to have a say in what the county decides? So
Yeah.
kind of what Jake just said. That in the CFA, Hood River County can figure it out, the fine details and what the port of Hood River and Hood River have to do. And Click Attack and figure out what Benjamin White Salmon have to submit, but at least the founding document is saying that whatever that eventual process is that the counties decide, these 6 founding entities of interest have a role in bringing nominations forward.
I
The
think
way I
it
would slightly
says that.
modify that.
Oh, is it?
I think that's the way it is
Oh.
now. The
Right,
way,
no, that's what I thought it was.
Do we just
The
walk
way-
ourselves,
yeah.
did I just walk us back to the beginning?
yeah.
Okay, done. Never mind.
Subcommittee work where Steve, myself, and Commissioner Benton were discussing through a lot of these issues. There was some concern about the boundaries of the communities that it might make sense that if there was somebody with a lot of really good expertise that should be appointed, that they shouldn't be limited to the boundaries of any of the entities.
That's a good example of the sort of thing that I think that we'll get some experience with in the first few rounds. Other things, the fact that every appointment that we have to make locally, we have to consider urban growth area versus, versus city limits and things like that, that you guys don't have quite the same politics over. So it's not identical. That's why I'm saying that we just say if there is a nomination process and details of the nomination process, we let the counties work them, because we have, just like you do, we have a county rule book as to how we make appointments for.
So I would say,
Positions.
from my point of view, if the county took that on, they will write a procedure and have a policy. But the city of Hood River and the port of Hood River get to review it and either approve it or veto it. I don't think you guys should just,
This is how it works for everything else.
I don't care. I'm telling you my opinion.
I'm gonna fight that.
Good, let's fight.
Can we do that separately? Can we do that separately from this?
Great progress.
So one suggestion is we go back and look at what it says now, which I think is what you are saying you want it to say. Or we can do a smaller committee that can go back and review it, come back next meeting with a recommendation of how to do it.
The only reason why I'm making such a fuss, if you had a clause in there, Arthur, that says, what I'm really concerned about is the port getting cut out of the process.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely fine once the new bridge is up and running. But there's gonna be so many interfaces between the port and the new bridge construction. To not have some kind of a potentially a say in that, I think that's a big mistake.
And-
Now, if we had some kind of a sunset clause in there, I'm fine with
And I've
that.
been through the same exact discussion in creating our urban renewal board, our urban renewal advisory board. And so I have some experience with that, and based on that, what I'm telling you is that the conditions change and it's hard to change the rules afterwards. So I'm trying to create something that allows for things to change over time. I'm expecting that the port's involvement in bridges in 15 years, the port will have nothing to do with bridges, won't even remember that bridges existed.
I'm hoping
Right.
it's much sooner.
I'm just giving a time frame where we're not gonna be part of. And that it's important that we set up a mechanism that doesn't leave these vestigial things around that people, I have people coming to me all the time saying, why didn't you set up the renewal advisory board that way? And there's all these things that Kate has to deal with now that that were mistakes that I made 15 years ago, and I don't want to make them again.
No, I understand. But I also understand there's a huge amount of interface coming. that we
There is,
don't
and that's why it
even
would be
have a
foolish.
clue of what-
It would be foolish for us as a board of, for the Hood River County Board to ignore that and to try to cut the port out of those discussions.
Oh, that would be ridiculous.
Right, absolutely, but to create
But
this,
at someday the port may go, why are
Why
you
would you
choosing
wait?
us
Yeah.
now? We don't have anything to
We're
do
done
with
with
this.
this, yeah.
But
Well, I
but right
think-
now,
I
it'd be
think we
crazy
need
to
take it
not do
court
that.
and
Yeah.
get a broader sense of how they feel about it. If they're fine with it, I don't care. But I'm just trying to watch out for this interface that's coming at us.
Yeah, well, that we have already,
It's gonna get
and get more
1,000 times
complicated.
worse.
Yeah,
we created an urban renewal board that has 2 port seats because of the belief that the urban renewal focus was going to be entirely on the waterfront. It's not anymore. Port folks don't even show up at the meetings. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Well, that's why I like the sunset clause.
Sounds like the subcommittee should continue.
I gotta run to another meeting.
Is that subcommittee still?
Well, the subcommittee has been Siegel, myself, and Commissioner Benton.
Right.
Yeah.
So there may be some discussion about that.
Well,
Anybody wants to-
I did get a message from Commissioner Benton over the next short period of time. He'd like to transfer his responsibilities over to Arthur, and he's gonna be back in a way. So I think as a minimum,
So Arthur, are you now the
Yeah,
new
Arthur.
member of the subcommittee?
I think, I had a very brief discussion with him about this, and I don't completely understand his goals and desires, so I want to talk to them first.
What I would say is we'll add you, and then when he wants to transition out, he can, and those 4 people will be
Okay.
a subcommittee that'll come back with
Yeah,
a
as long as it's just. 2 of us,
recommended
not
language.
4. Yeah,
Does that work?
yeah. of course.
Let's keep going if we can.
Yep. Legal review is underway. Court Legal has looked at it. They've had comments. Steve is incorporating those comments, and you'll see that in the next version.
And I think I got you the city, I forwarded the city comments.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
it's not popping in my head that I saw those, but
It's been a couple weeks ago.
okay, then it's probably on. Steve, do you have the legal comments from Hood River,
City.
the city?
I have comments from, in an email form, if that's
Yeah.
what's,
Yeah, that's what I
That was
meant.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yes, I have those.
Okay.
And just for the record, I believe that our legal counsel will be providing a memo to the Port Commission regarding their opinions of the CFA and the effects to the port.
It's not tomorrow night, though.
Not, you won't see those tomorrow, but maybe in a couple of weeks.
All right. Next is Amendment 1. We've submitted Amendment 1. We went over that 2 weeks ago with kind of what that was made up of. It's primarily bringing a couple staff on full time, advancing preliminary engineering work and the geotechnical work. Arup has reviewed that. Their letter was in the packet. And I think we want to take that to the board for recommendation to take to the Port Commission for approval.
And it might, probably shouldn't be.
The one
advocating
talking
for his
this.
amendment.
Yes, so I'll let Kevin
Yes,
advocate the rest of us.
Thanks for listening a little bit.
a little bit of conflict of interest.
Hey.
I'll step in. No, we went through a couple rounds of feedback between the initial proposal from HNTV. Commissioner Fox was involved in those meetings with ARUP. ARUP was acting as the third-party peer reviewer, provided some comments. We were able to reconcile whatever issues there were. Their memo is in the packet, and then on my staff memo to you and the Port Commission is a brief summary of that. But I think we've gotten to the point to where it's very close. And so Commissioner Fox, and you were involved in those, so
Yeah, I
recommended it.
So ARUP took the scope of work without knowing what the hours were that HNTV was claiming. And they came in really close. It was within, it was a little over 8,000 hours, and they were only off by 400, 500 hours in 8,000. And again, this is it's not a lump sum contract. It's going to be what they actually spend on it. So if they spend 7,000 hours to get the work done, we only pay for 7,000 hours. There's a couple of points that could impact this cost. And that the big one is on the engineering side, the preliminary engineering. That in December, when we decide which way to proceed, if we proceed, the amount of hours that engineering has to do preliminary engineering goes down. If we pick something else, those particular hours go up, has nothing to do with the overall cost. So I see this approach is the most conservative approach as far as authorizing work. It should, I'm hoping it should be reduced from there when we finally make this selection, and we'll get them to give us the revised once we make that decision. You take a look at the wage rates and so on. In the state of Oregon, the overheads, whether we like them or not, are approved by the state. We really don't get to vote. So those are fixed. So if they're using company X and they're not full-time, they have a home office rate that we don't get to vote on. It's what it is. So the only area of change is either in the estimated hours to perform some work or the wage rate itself, and the wage rate is based on the mix of people, senior to very junior type people. If you take a look at the wage rate, just the pure wage rate, we're within $2. The two companies are within $2 of each other. It was like 161 versus 164, 63, something like that. So it was close enough to say, okay, we're in agreement there. You take a look at the hours, we were close enough to say it's a very small percentage difference. If you get them straight on in somebody's budget, there will be a difference.
The
the
one
other-
other piece I would add was just on the overhead rate, you do get the benefit of the ones who come on full time
Right.
of getting their field rate versus overhead rate, which is a difference. There's a difference there, and each company is determined by the federal government, but
A field rate versus a what?
an overhead rate of office rate, home office rate,
Oh.
where they're sitting in an office, they're paying for it. It's a higher rate than a field office rate where they're sitting in a office that the project paying
So
for. So
this change, Mike and Brian
Are now
go
on a
on to
field
a
rate.
Field rate. So for a given amount of money, we can actually get more done because it's a cheaper rate.
I saw there's still a per diem rate?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm like,
It's the
and
what?
again, the per
Federal per
diems
diem.
are federal,
Right.
so.
I saw the per diem and I was just, nothing against you guys. It was just a crazy idea that came to my head when I saw that. I'm like, why don't we just buy a big house with a lot of
Mhm.
bedrooms?
Well, that,
I mean,
and I will say
That
that
is
that
done.
is an option. We could rent a hotel or not hotel, sorry, a room or a
Condo.
condo or something like that and pay a monthly fee, and then that is what we use.
So
I mean,
That
I don't
actually
know. I
sometimes
mean, I
can
just,
be cheaper.
when I know per diem, I mean,
Yeah.
my previous husband did per diem all the time because he worked on big jobs, electrical, away from home, and it was great. But I'm just like,
So
when you start adding them up, it's like, we could buy something and then just sell it when the project's
And
done.
we can, I mean, if that's something you want us to look at, we can look at that.
I don't know.
I think you should look at it, but I think where it's really gonna come into play, when we get the next chunk of money. And we're actively out there doing a progressive design build contract, we've awarded a contract. Then I think we got some more stability to the project, and then we look at that.
And we do have a negotiated rate with the hotel to get a fixed rate for the company. So it's $99 on off season and $149 and on season. So
Well,
But-
but maybe we should just look at it at some time in the
okay, we'll keep an
nearish
eye on it. and
future
If it's the right
to
economic,
see
we'll-
what the
bring it back
differences
and let
would
you
be.
Okay, so with that, if you go to the very last page, you have a current commitment of $1,000,007.
correct.
And this changes for 2
Yes, 6.5,
yeah, so we're looking.
4.2
for
total.
approval to add to your contract to get to a maximum of
I think it's 4.239.
$4.273 million,
Over what period of time?
1 year.
In June.
Yeah, June 30th. And whatever's left over would then be part of the
Carry
next
forward.
one, right? Like
Carry
it would
forward.
just be, yeah.
Yeah, we're not losing it. It's just commitment. Now, you also
Yeah.
sent out where are we on the budget? And the
Yes.
budget is 520 million.
Yes,
So how does this fit into the 520? Now, remember, this is more than just the management overhead. This is the geotech work, which is in the estimate, but in a different spot. And the preliminary engineering. which is
so
in the estimate, but a different spot.
based on the PCE, which is the preliminary cost estimate, the budget for the project management, which is PM funding, communications, is 35.2 million. We would be at 4.5 of that, 35 for the life of the project. And then the project development, which was PE right away and permitting for preliminary was 13.4. I'm sorry. Let me go back. That was the total. For the project management, it was 35.2. We would be at 1.9. For the project development, which is preliminary engineering, it's 13.4 and we would be at 2.6. So I think we're within, if you space that out evenly, I think we're within, the range is actually under the ranges of where we, the
And as we
PCE
go
had us.
forward, when Brian hits the right mark, we're gonna recast the estimate into a budget.
Right,
And then we'll update it yearly to really see where we are on this,
correct.
because I personally think right now we're okay, but I wouldn't want it to go another year without having that.
Yeah, we'll do annual updates on that based on, the geotech for one is really based on a big guess right now. And once we get some more detailed information, we'll be able to own those information and that stuff down. And as things progress, that's, that gets closer and closer. Your contingency gets smaller, your risk gets smaller as you advance
But I think,
data.
Do you
I
think we
think
get
you gotta
that in the
spend money.
next 6 months, though?
I'm sorry,
Get that in the next 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay,
Ish. Yeah. That should be coming this week, is Friday, is what she told me. What's that?
Yeah.
When the project. Man.
so this next piece, there's an amendment too about the float.
Yes, so that's, yes, so we have some presentations and again, similar to like we did with the last one, and hopefully you're finding value. If not, we can stop doing this for you. But the, sorry, I lost my switch meetings on myself. So,
Share your screen.
no, I lost my place in my OneNote. So that was amendment 1. So I think we need to take a vote for that to make a recommendation to go to the commission, right? We didn't do that.
Yeah, so I think there's general consensus to take.
Well, let's ask the question, are you guys okay with amendment 1 for the tune of $2.5 million to add to HNTD contract to cover Mike and Brian going full-time, which there's plenty of work now that Kevin is moved up in the tower. He's no longer full-time on this thing. And starting the preliminary design to get us ready to go and the geotech work. That's the big pieces of this 2.5.
Correct.
My opinion is that we got to do it. It's time to go. And we're convincing people this is a real project. This is a major step in making it a real project. With that said, be warned that there's another one coming, and that'll pick up the whole financial piece of this thing as far as looking at TIFIA loans and all the rest of that, and polling, as well as tribal interface. And what was the third?
Communications.
And communications piece of it. That's coming at us in the next month. But assuming that we can get that at a reasonable number going through AREP again, I think we got to go do that one too.
So I guess one question I have, and I think you kind of answered it, but I want to make sure I was understanding the last bit of the conversation correctly. So ultimately, what's happening now that we're underway, some of these things that have been living as different line items in the overall bridge budget are starting to get activated,
Yes.
and they're coming in as part of this amendment. So while there's admittedly some sticker shock of seeing 4.2, when last summer we were really working to get this down, and now feeling like we're back up, it's less that, it's more about now pulling in these other line items because work's underway.
We are basically starting to work towards the 503
Okay,
is the way I would explain it, right? We are now chipping away at that 503 million. So it's the dollars are going to continue to grow. Just,
Yeah.
I mean, as we get the contractor in, I mean, when the contractor gets in here, we'll have $1 million a month invoices. I mean, they will burn
Yeah.
through some money. So that's the best way I would say, look at it, is you are now eating away at that $503 million cost.
Well, we've been asking them to try and accelerate, get these legislative meetings
Yeah.
and get your communications going. We're gonna have the legislators, we're like, do it, do it, do it. I mean, we are telling you to go as fast as you
Yeah, I mean,
can.
it's-
So,
yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
pushing it.
We, well, I'll stop. Your thoughts.
We talked about hiring out the design and knowing how long it took to bring on HMP. And now we're talking about, we're gonna give you money now. And so that's pulling it out of the way. And that was, I thought, a consensus that we'd already agreed on. And so usually when we're starting to talk about money, usually it's already been decided on by the policies that we've already set. And to me, it sounds like this is pretty much asking for what we've already agreed to. And it's backed up by a third party saying it's the right money. I mean, I don't know how you argue that unless Kevin were to say, well, we want to agree to 4 million, but we actually don't have that money to, if they did it. Now we've got a problem. As long as we have the money, that's where we go. If we want to redirect any spending away from communications or something else, that's a policy decision that we need to make. But so far, what I'm seeing is a professional company doing a professional job, getting paid for what they do. And yeah, let's move ahead, unless, we get none of these large grants and we're not gonna be.
Yeah, then we're gonna have to go. hard.
Then we're gonna slow the roll a little bit.
And currently, this is against the 15 million that we have in grants. So it's not coming out of toll revenue directly. It's coming out of the 15 million in grant funding that we have.
Yeah, but if we're in the same spot a year from now and we can't tap into the 75, or we don't have another grant
Yeah.
that is in the works that we know what we're gonna get, then we're probably gonna have to say, let's have a talk about this.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, at some point then, yeah, there's not an endless bucket of money out there somewhere that is funding this, so.
But I think this positions us well. We're not supposed to be comparing ourselves to I-5, but guess what? We're comparing ourselves to I-5. Okay, and when I was at Pacific Northwest Waterway Association, we got a good briefing on I-5. And I think our message is both projects are extremely important to the regions. Absolutely. The difference between us and them, our bridge is super simple. It's extremely straightforward and it's fairly cheap. You take a look at I-5, the new approach on I-5, it is going to be by any definition, a super mega project. It's on the lines of Boston Artery. Not quite as bad, but extremely complex. We're talking about not just a bridge, we're talking about several bridges. We're not talking about one interchange, we're talking about lots of interchanges that you're gonna have to redo while you're trying to keep traffic going. The complexity is gonna go way up. Fox's opinion, you're looking at a $10 billion project. Easy. Nobody's thinking $10 billion. They're basically starting over with their EIS. They're doing a supplementary. They're just now starting. There's gonna be lots of public involvement. When the public finally figures out that these 5 interchanges are all gonna get reworked over the course of years that they're trying to use them. I mean, it's just like Boston Artery. It was, for the public, it was a nightmare under construction. But when it was done, everybody's saying, wow, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But it's gonna be a real pain for a whole bunch of years for a lot of people. So what I see of our project, if we keep going like we're trying to position this thing for, I think we can fit our project in on the front end of that project and grab some funding here. Doesn't impact their long range when they really recognize what it's really gonna take. And we can sneak this one in, get it done get it operational, and then it's gonna naturally fit into another sequence on that big project. That's what I think we're doing here, is positioning ourselves to fill that little valley there.
Can I make a motion that we approve amendment 1? We're good.
Good, good. Okay, amendment 1's good.
Thank you.
Christie.
So we'll take that to
Oh, I'm
the,
fine. I'm alternate.
Okay, sorry, just want to make sure.
we'll take it to the board tomorrow night.
All right, amendment 2, and we've got a couple people that have a catch plane, so we're gonna jump right into funding, finance and tolling and TIFIA. And we're gonna be as efficient as we can possibly be on these presentations.
Because you've got to get the plane.
Thank you. I apologize. The plane does not wait.
No.
I'm patient. United Airlines is not.
No, that's
Particularly,
true.
But there's a couple people on the phone or on this call that I want to introduce you to. And I've asked them to prepare a brief presentation for us to give us an orientation to what I think, if it hasn't become a household word with this group, it's going to, and that is TIFIA. The TIFIA loan program, which will be explained to you shortly, is probably the most promising source of financing, which we're looking at to cover maybe 20% of the $520 million. And so I've asked a couple of people that I work with, colleagues of mine at HNTB, who are TIFIA experts, to join us on the call. And you talked earlier about, the confidence that you have that we can actually make this work, put the puzzle pieces together and have a real project. One of the things that gives me that kind of confidence is these quality of people that I get to work with. So I want to introduce you first to Kate Trimble. Kate works in HNTB's advisory practice, and she works in finance and accounting for toll agencies specifically around the country. And most recently, she has served embedded with HNTB's general engineering consultant for the North Carolina Turnpike Authority. And she has there been an assistant to the CFO for several years. And in that capacity has been responsible for managing new project financing for NCTA. Most recently, she played a key role in a $499 million TIFIA loan for a project that North Carolina Turnpike has just gotten underway. And so she's also managed refundings which are refinancing of existing bonds with other toll revenue bonds. So she knows about those kinds of things as well. The nice thing about having Kate on the team is she has recent and extensive experience as an applicant to the TIFIA process. So she knows, all of the steps in the process, and she's going to talk a little bit about that today. I also want to introduce you to Sean McMaster. He's also part of HNTB's advisory practice, and he is a real expert on federal policy and legislative initiatives with regard to infrastructure. And prior to coming to HNTB, 3 years ago, Sean, ish?
Yeah, a little over 2 years.
Okay, a little over 2 years ago, he was Deputy Chief of Staff to US DOT Secretary Elaine Chao. But what makes him really valuable and most relevant to us is in that position, he chaired the Secretary's Council on Credit and Finance, which was the group that made the final decisions on all of the TIFIA loans. So I've got someone who has just been through the process of securing the loans on the borrower side. I also have someone who was on the lender decision-making committee to decide to approve those lines. And so I can't think of two better people to have on our team. And I wanted to introduce you to that. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Kate, who I asked just to give us a little orientation about what TIFIA is, how it works, and what we're in for over the next year or so as we go through the process of hopefully making ourselves very attractive to the lenders. Kate, all yours.
Thanks, Carrie. And as you said, we'll try and make this as quick and efficient as possible. But those who may know, TIFIA can be the opposite of a quick and efficient process. So we'll just go ahead and dive right in. So TIFIA, better known as the Transportation Infrastructure Finance Innovation Act. This is a credit assistance program within USDOT, currently run by the Build America Bureau. TIFIA is really known for having the lower interest rate and a flexible amortization. The interest rate is essentially the US Treasury rate at closing plus a basis point, and the amortization schedule typically about 35 years. You know, we can address alternatives there down the line. Interest will not accrue until proceeds are drawn. That's another positive. And there's no prepayment penalty. As Carrie mentioned, in the long list of refundings, I've actually supported a refunding of a TIFIA loan. So no penalty on refunding out a TIFIA. Here's just high level kind of major requirements for the program. You're looking at a minimum project cost, $50 million. Credit assistance limit typically at that 33%. Now there are opportunities with Infra Extra and a newer TIFIA 49 program, Infra Extra being for projects who applied for and were not successful in an infra grant with some limitations. And then the TIFIA 49 and newer program announced for transit-oriented development. So those, while not guaranteed, can get you, up to that 49% potentially of credit assistance. You're also required to get investment grade ratings. If the loan is less than 150 million, you're looking at needing 1 rating. If it's higher than that, you need 2. This would be from Fitch, Moody's, S&P, and such. You're also required to have a dedicated repayment source, most notably toll revenue. And then you have to meet your applicable federal requirements. So everything through NEPA. And this all has to be completed before, closing on a loan. So I'll go ahead and take a minute, pause there. Any questions up front on this intro information?
Yeah, I've got an understanding that you don't start repayment until 5 years after commercial.
Sean, are you familiar with that?
That's what we got out of DC on our last visit with,
5
Once
years
you
after
start drawing,
completion.
or is it
After
completion?
close
After-
of the loan,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, close.
But is that the case? Do you know,
No.
Sean, or?
no, we were very specific about this. Our bridge goes commercial. 5 years after it goes commercial, we have 5 years to also help generate a reserve. That's when repayments, the latest repayment to start. You can start it early if you want to, but no later than 5 years.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the department has the discretion to delay repayment up to 5 years. Or at least that's how it used to be. They had normally it's right after, but they can delay it up to 5 years after substantial completion of the project.
What was so attractive to me is when we had that discussion back there, that gives us some time to build up some more additional reserve. If we can decide to not use that, but that flexibility was very attractive.
Sean, just quick question. So what is the determining factor to allow for up to 5 years to have that longer term of repayment?
That's a great question. I think that's a good discussion to have with the Bureau. To be honest, that was probably an area of interaction that never came to my desk. So the Council on Credit and Finance, for your awareness, I mean, it's the political body that oversees the Bureau. So the Bureau does a lot of its technical analysis. Once we recommend to the Secretary to approve loans, then she'll sign off or disagree. But then it goes back down to the technical world and they kind of carry that through. I would be guessing, but I think it's an argument you could make as to, financial capacity to repay the loan and making sure that you're in a good spot, that this doesn't put you, you know, in a negative position to complete your commitment under the loan structure. I would guess you might be more advantageous if you were rural, had an equity focus in your project, you know what I mean? Like spoke to some of the policy considerations that might, as long as you can meet all the financial commitments, that might give you a little bit extra latitude in some of these discretionary decisions that the Bureau can make on your behalf as
Great,
well.
thank you.
Question on that, aren't we rural and equity driven? It seems like we check those boxes too.
Big time.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
climate focused as well. So I forgot to mention that, but you got to hit climate as well in that mix.
All right, thanks, guys. We want to keep moving here. Get you guys, these guys are all in the Eastern time zone. We're keeping them from their dinner.
No worries. So just before we jump into the next two slides are going to have a lot of information on them. These are directly from the Bureau, you know, how they foresee this process going. This makes it seem like a very black and white process. It's a very fluid process. So, you know, take these next couple graphics with a grain of salt. You know, how this kind of works is the first step is really to engage with the Bureau and have a discussion with them and talk through your project and talk through your current financial plan, status of environmental, what have you, and really let them help guide this process for you. You know, in my experience, they're more than welcome to jump on the phone, have conversations with you, and help you along this way. From there, you know, let the Bureau kind of guide when the appropriate time is to submit what's called a letter of interest. Letter of interest is a little bit of a misleading title. It's essentially a draft application. And this is about, you know, 15 to 20 pages of information about the project costs, purpose and needs, status of environmental. It includes a detailed plan of finance. So it's a little bit more invasive than, you know, what a letter of interest may sound like. And then from there, you may have a little bit of what we've considered a due diligence process. They'll start asking questions about the agency, the project, and then ultimately, assuming the project goes through, get invited into what's called their creditworthiness stage. The Bureau can then invite out to make a presentation to them. You know, I did an all-day workshop with North Carolina, just talking through every single aspect there is about the project and the plan of finance. And then once you're invited in that creditworthiness stage, you have this presentation. The Bureau is going to start onboarding their advisors. Now they're going to bring in a financial advisor, a traffic and revenue consultant. They have their legal counsel, and their job is really to vet your advisors. And so once you hit this creditworthiness phase, you'll have this period, you know, 5-6 months. It can be, in my experience, of their traffic and revenue consultant digging into your traffic and revenue report and asking all sorts of questions, asking for sensitivity analyses, that such sort of thing. So once you really get through this creditworthiness stage, and the Bureau can really dig in and learn about your agency, learn everything they can about your project, you can then be invited to officially apply to the program, which is then where you feed into, you know, they're going to turn and present to the credit council. And then, you know, from there, you work your way through closing. And so again, just another high level graphic talking through major requirements on the top, applications and such on the bottom. You'll notice there is no scale on this graphic, and that's because every project, every loan is going to be on a different time frame. So you can't put time blocks on this.
Hey,
Right.
Kate.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question of the group here? Have you engaged with the Bureau as of today on the project? Have you begun that initial consultation with the Bureau at this point?
When you say bureau, you're talking about.
Build America Bureau. The
Yeah,
meetings
Build
we
America.
had with.
Sorry, yes.
We've had
Yeah, I was referring to the Build America Bureau.
We had one discussion with them in face-to-face 2 months ago or so, where they talked about Tifia. That's really the first time we had heard about that. And it's very consistent with what you're saying here. We asked them, when should we proceed? And as I remember, they said, the earlier the better.
Mhm.
The beauty of it, and we talked about our plans, and they felt that we would be strong consideration for a Tifia loan, based on what we told them. They said that the beauty of a Tifia loan is more like a letter of credit. You have it there ready to go, but don't use it until you really need to. So their guidance was to go now, get yourself lined up to fill in the request.
Did they, when you had a conversation with them, did they talk about the letter of interest being the next step, or did they want you to come back to them with more detail before submitting the letter? Did you get into that discussion by chance?
So we did talk with the executive director, Morteza.
Yep. Yep.
And so, now I do know that Hal Heemster, who is our government affairs consultant, he would like to see some type of, I don't know if pre-application is a term,
Mhm.
but he would like to see some kind of formal correspondence back to BAD before our trip in December.
Yeah, kind of like the letter of interest that.
Well, and it's a fair point. I don't think the LOI was specifically called out. But there sound like should be some formal correspondence, even if it's not a letter of intent.
I think we are planning to have a formal consultation within, Morteza actually assigned us an analyst to work with, Nefertiti.
Yeah.
Harris.
Oh, she's
You
great.
know, yes, she is
Okay.
great, and Kate has worked with her in the past on her North Carolina loans.
And
And so-
she was at that meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and so they've actually assigned her to work with us, and so
Perfect.
before your trip, we will have had at least one and maybe more formal consultations, and so I think it will be very safe for you to say that we have started the formal consultation program. I'm not sure we're quite ready to do a formal letter of interest at this point, because the agency that's going to be the borrowing agency doesn't even exist yet. But I do think that we're ready for formal consultation.
Great. Let me throw one random bit of information out there, because I know you're looking at federal funding as well, not just on the financing side. And having quite a bit of experience managing the discretionary grant programs from the Secretary's office, I will say there are a handful of times where applicants will want a Tifia loan and a federal grant at the same time for the same project. And so the timing of those applications has to kind of align. And what they'll end up doing generally is they'll vet you for a Tifia loan and then hold, and then till you're like right near the end. And then, hopefully you will have a successful discretionary grant. So as you think of applying for different grant programs for the money you will need to build your project or want for your project, the timing of Tifia and the grant will have to align, because the department will not give you a loan or give you a grant if you don't have that other money there to complete your project. That's typically how it will work. So it's possible they could do either one, but my strong advice would be, as you get farther along with the applications for discretionary grants, you're going to want to consider project timing and making sure that your loan process is somewhat aligned with the timing of the grant program you're applying for funding, or that you've got far enough along in the loan process so that when you apply for those federal grants or grants, they can kind of match it up and approve them all kind of roughly in the same time frame. If that makes sense.
We did have that kind of a discussion while we were there. And the thought was that the Tifia application timeframe is somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple of years.
It can be, without a
Yeah,
doubt.
so we talked about, when do we see we need the money, the big money? We would like to be in construction in 25. 2025, 26 time range. And he felt that in the near future, it wouldn't be too early to start this process.
Yeah, I mean, you can always start and slow down the TIFIA process, right?
Right.
The application submission, if you look at that slide there towards the right-hand side, that's when things get really time frame specific. So stuff before that to your left is a little bit variable. For first-time applicants, the time frame you mentioned, the 2 years, like that's not out of the question for an applicant who doesn't have a long history of working with the Bureau. Once you figure out the process and know exactly all the steps, it's typically more abbreviated, but 2 years is not out of the question for a first-time applicant for these types of loans.
I think
So,
Kate's
yeah, and
got
then-
some, I think Kate's got an example of.
Oh, sure.
of
Yeah,
her
sorry, I didn't mean
recent-
to hijack
that's
your
fine.
your slide, Kate.
No, I think Kate's got an example of a timeframe. I think that's her next slide.
Oh, perfect. Well, maybe we should go here. Sorry, Kate, I'll turn it back.
No, thank you. This
thanks,
is very
Kate.
useful.
But yeah, like Carrie said, so the loan I kind of saw beginning to end most recently was for a project called Complete 540 out here in North Carolina for their phase 1. Now, I will say I started in October 2017, so I was not around and could not narrow down when their initial engagement with the Bureau date was. However, at the highest level, LOI was submitted in November of 17, and you can see closing was in December of 19. So this here was, just over 2 years, 25 months. And now there was a little bit of a, let's hurry up and get TIFIA ready. And then, North Carolina actually slowed the process down a little bit. So there is, like Sean mentioned, up until that application point, it's very fluid, and it's just what's next and what can we hit. So submitted that LOI, due diligence started, not till a year after when that draft traffic and revenue study was submitted. Invited into that creditworthiness stage in January of 19, presented up in DC to the Bureau in February, a month later, and then had that 5-6 months of that true due diligence process of their advisors coming in and really digging into the financial model, digging into that traffic and revenue study. And then from there, draft documents get sent out. We were actually in a position for when we were invited to apply, we were able, as you can see, to turn around that application the next day. And that just speaks to the constant coordination and communication you're having with the Bureau during this process, where they're ready and able to tell you when they're going to the credit council and when they anticipate you're going to get invited to apply. So in the background, we're preparing that application, ready to submit it once we get that invitation. And then from there, that was September, and we were able to close, 3-4 months later. I will say I am now part of helping them on their phase 2 of this project. They did consult with the Bureau initially in March of 2020 and did not submit an LOI until October of 2020. So I do have a time frame on the phase 2 project, which is still underway. And sorry, someone.
Nope, you're good.
Go ahead.
Okay. And then just to touch on this briefly, there are fees associated with this. So, you'd be responsible to reimburse DOT for their outside advisors. This is the range they provide. And then upon closing on a loan, you have an annual servicing fee, approximately $13,000. And then some other costs to consider, right? You're going to have your financial advisor, counsel, you have to pay for your rating agencies, those ratings, and costs associated with your traffic and revenue and general engineering consultants. And then from there, again, we've kind of already touched on this, but really next steps, it sounds like you've had those initial conversations with the Bureau, but maybe sounds like one more start to build that team of advisors, and then we can start compiling that letter of interest for the areas we have ready on the project.
That's terrific. Thank you, Kate. And these folks are on our team. So this is your first introduction to them. You will see them again. You may see a lot of Kate.
She has family here in the region.
So, and she's located in North Carolina, but, you know, she will be part of this team and will be primarily responsible for supervising the application process, and will be involved in all of our consultations with Buy America Bureau. They know her, not Buy America, Build America. And obviously they know Sean, and he will be able to help us tremendously with kind of an insider's view.
I'm really anxious to hear future meetings. The steps we need to take to build our credit rating.
Pay your cards on time. Okay.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was,
that,
that was my question too, Mike. That was, you know, I know that you talked about the timing for the TIFIA and then federal grants, you know, making sure those line up correctly. But then we've got the two states that we're working with too. And do those also have to be lined up at the same time? You know, if Oregon doesn't do a transportation package for a little while and we've got this ahead of that, is that gonna?
I think,
Be an
as
issue.
Sean mentioned, there's magic when all the pieces come together. And right now, we're early in the process, but we're kind of at this stage of a standoff, where everyone who is a potential contributor to this project is looking at everyone else, saying who's going to move first. Now, to our advantage, Washington has, and they've committed $75 million. If Oregon would do likewise, or even better, then all of a sudden the project starts to look more real, and it starts to look more real to the feds. And as Sean mentioned, the feds are going to be in coordination on this. They're going to say, okay, you're asking for $100 million TIFIA loan. We're also considering $195 million over here in infra and mega and bill, or and rural, or BIP. How do those fit together? And does that finally bring us to the point of completion on this? And so, yeah, I think that the timing is important, and we're gonna need to be doing full court presses in a lot of areas simultaneously.
Yeah, hey Carrie, do you mind if I jump in real fast on
Sure,
on the money
please.
side? So at the department, especially on the, you'll need it for closing on the loan, you'll need to have your repayment. But as far as to complete the project, you're definitely going to need that money committed, identified when you want to get a grant from the department. So if you're looking for 195 million from Mega, or 200 million from Mega, part of that application, as I'm sure you all know, is outlining your budget and your finance and your committed funding. And they're going to want to know you've got that commitment from the states, or reasonably assured you can get it. And you're going to need it before you can close on the, before you can get the award. So you don't have to have the money when you apply, you have to have it before you can get the award. So, and you won't get a grant without having all the money to make the project work outlined. And some people will say, I need extra, competitive grant dollars, but that's unlikely and makes it, less competitive. So my recommendation for folks is always go to the one grant program that will give you the dollars you need to make the project work. Make sure you have your committed funding and match that up timeline wise with the Bureau if you're going to go after a TIFIA loan.
And a question for you.
Yep.
We've got the 75 million from Washington State.
Yeah.
Trying to get money from Oregon. I know it's better to have the money from Oregon. How is it conveyed if we've got a letter of commitment from Oregon? Does that help?
You have a letter of, okay, so what is the letter of commitment is, if you will give us this award, we'll put the money, we'll separate money out for it, the project? Is that essentially the letter?
The letter of commitment is something like, we recognize the need of a new bridge. We recognize that you're looking for about 125 million from Oregon. We recognize that's a reasonable number, and we're committed to work towards finding the money. But that's where it stops.
So if you were applying for an infra grant and you were asking for some amount of money, and that was your commitment for this missing 125 million that you need to make your project work, that's probably not going to be enough to get you a grant. I mean, I wouldn't think that kind of a letter would be a strong enough commitment to assure the federal government that if they park $200 million on this bridge, that Oregon is going to come to the table with its money. Now, they might think that was good, but my guess would be that that's not a strong enough commitment, right?
So-
Unless you said, listen, we have this money and we will, reprogram the money for the bridge.
So
So I
Sean,
think-
what you're saying in essence is that the federal government has to be the last money in.
That's typically, they want to be the last money in, right? For them, it's a risk, right? So if I, the federal government, give you an award and you can't make that committed funds go, and you can't make the project work, then that money just sits there and I get no project, no jobs, no benefits, no any of that, right? And so you see this sometimes on the political risk side, where you have projects for whatever reason are locally in favor, and like maybe the state would want something, and so they'll go out, they'll get the grant, the locals will throw a fit, the project will be a problem, and then the project doesn't move forward. And then, now the federal government's like, why did we give you that money? So, I mean, it is just a commitment. You have to say, I have all these local dollars to match the federal commitment. And so it's a risk thing for them. And they don't like taking these rare dollars for these programs that are like 10 times oversubscribed.
So
And,
Terry, I think this is gonna be a challenge.
I
How
have
do
never
we- how
said
do
it
we-
wasn't a challenge, right? You never
How
not
do
heard
we
those words come
figure
out of
our
my
way
mouth.
through this one? And I would say more to come. And we're gonna have to move on here because I think we're gonna lose some commissioners here real quick.
Yep. So
It's 4:30, yeah.
we have two options. We can power through the presentations, or we can come back in 2 weeks and do them in 2 weeks. I'd like to
How much
power
longer?
through them
How
so
much
we
longer? How much more?
Yeah.
can.
I'm gonna have to go, so Mike will
Yeah.
have to power
I
through
almost,
my.
I think we've lost Christie and
We did.
Arthur and
and
Mayor Kiewit wasn't
so-
able to attend, so maybe.
My thought is we come back and unless you all want to try to do a meeting next week, but
Now, let's stay to every other week.
okay.
To 2 weeks. Let's come back to do the other twos and a little wrap up on this. I think.
Our next
know
one's
where
the
we're headed
31st,
on this.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, I will be virtual for that one. but
Yeah.
That's virtual's fine. We know your per diem cost.
$139 next door, $149.
So, all right, so,
Not too bad.
let me just make sure there was,
Hey, hey, folks, we appreciate what you did, and I apologize that we're gonna have to delay the other two discussions.
well, and we
because
still
we're
have to
just
get
flat out
through
of
the.
time, but
yeah.
I can tell you, this is just the opening volley of lots of discussions to come.
Yeah.
I'm personally convinced we got the right team, so we need your help. And think innovative, think breaking out of the box, breaking glass. What do we gotta do? We gotta get a new bridge.
I'm like Colonel Glass will write a check.
Kate and Sean, thank you so much. I appreciate you and
Yeah, thank you.
it's
Thank
now
you.
well past your dinner time, so go have dinner and we'll see you again maybe in 2 weeks if you want to do a little
Yeah.
follow-up with these two.
Do you have some other things we need to do though, Mike? Is there anything
Any
else we
action-
have to do?
Consensus stuff
Action
or no?
items or?
No, the amendment was, we did the ODOT Technical Service IGA, they're drafting. The amendment 2, we won't get to until we do the presentations. We will continue to work on it. Project delivery method is coming in December. The approach we talked to, the second draft review, we talked to. Nope, we're good.
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you.
So with that said, we're adjourned.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Here, you're off to the races, huh?